How to avoid the most common mistakes in Xero. In this video, I'm going to take you through the most common mistakes that I see when I look at Xero accounts. And trust me, I have seen a lot of Xero accounts. Let's head into Xero and I'll talk you through the mistakes I see and how you can avoid them. Okay, this has got to be the number one mistake in Xero. On your Xero dashboard, your bank accounts will appear on the left-hand side and there will be a section where it shows you your statement balance. Now this is your statement balance according to Xero, and you must check that this agrees to your actual bank statement balance. Mistakes do happen, bank feeds can go wrong, but if you check this on a regular basis, you'll ensure that everything is okay. If everything isn't okay, mistakes have happened, you can refer to some of my videos showing you how to fix these mistakes. The second mistake that I see all the time is when purchase invoices, bills are entered in Xero and VAT is reclaimed by mistake. Now, you don't have to be a VAT expert. It helps if you got some VAT knowledge, but the only time you should be reclaiming VAT is if you have a purchase invoice, a bill, or a receipt showing that there is VAT to be reclaimed. So if we look at this bill that we have on the screen, it's from Dallas Decor. It's 2 Happy Housewares, and we can see that there's no mention of VAT on this invoice. It might be, it says Dallas Decor, it might be that this supplier is not in the UK, or it might be that this supplier is a business that's not VAT registered. The VAT threshold in the UK is currently £85,000, so you can be dealing with small businesses that are not VAT registered. So what you need to do is you need to check your purchase invoice, check your bill, and see if there's VAT on that before you claim it. So we're entering this invoice in Xero. We've put the description. We're going to pick up purchase code. So I'm going to choose bedroom items. And when I do that, the default in Xero is to claim 20% VAT, because most of the time when we buy bedroom items, our supplier will be VAT registered. So the default is 20%, but because there's no VAT on this invoice, we need to change it, and instead we're going to choose Xero rated. There are times when your purchases won't have VAT on them. So for example, if you had a flight, there is no VAT on flights. Again, you don't need to know that. You don't need to have that knowledge. Instead, you would look at your bill. So if you've got a bill from British Airways, you would look at that bill and you would see that there's no VAT on it. So you must be careful and ensure that you have VAT to reclaim before the tax rate in Xero is entered as 20% VAT on expenses. So I have changed this, I've changed it to Xero rated. I can now approve my bill. Okay, let's talk about another very common mistake that I see when entering bills in Xero. So we have this bill, it's from Star Stationery and it's for a jumbo stapler. So we start entering it in Xero. We'll type in the value, and then when we get to the account code, we think, okay, where do we code this to? We're not sure, so let's just search for the word office. And what we find is we have 2 different codes here. We could choose stationery and office supplies, or we could choose office equipment. Now often code 461 will not be called stationery and office supplies, it will be called stationery and printing. So if you search for the word office, you might only find this 700 code and you'd say, brilliant, that is the code I want. But it's not, because a 700 code in Xero is a fixed asset code, so it should only be used for high value items that you're going to retain in your business for more than a year. So make sure that if you're using the standard chart of accounts in Xero, that you choose the 461 code, which if it's not been amended will probably say stationery and printing. Once you're happy with your invoice, entering it in Xero, of course you would approve. And just to make that a bit clearer, if we go to our chart of accounts, searching for the word office, we can see we can ignore this lease one. It's because the word office appears here. But we have stationery and office supplies, which we can see is an overhead, whereas 710 office equipment is a fixed asset. Fixed asset being a higher value item that will be retained and used in the business for more than a year. So you clearly do not want to mess up your fixed asset register where you're going to track them all and depreciate them all with small value items such as your invoice for a stapler. Let's look at another very common example of an error in Xero. You're on the bank account, you've got a transaction to reconcile, and it is pretty clear what it is. It's a salary payment. So you're going to go over to the Create tab. You're going to say it's to Amy, and then you're looking for a code. So you're thinking, okay, what about the word salary? And you start looking for it, and you're going to go straight and say, that's exactly what I want. It's code 477 salaries. But is it? And the answer is no. So let's head to the chart of accounts and let's look at the code for salaries. If we scroll down, we'll find it here. It's a salary code, and yes, the narrative in Xero says payment to employees exchange for the resources, but this is an overhead, a cost code in your business, and what you pay your employees is not the cost to your business, because when you think about it, you're deducting taxes, you're maybe deducting pension, you're deducting national insurance. So instead, where you want to code these payments to is to a liability code. Now you would find it on the list, or if you go to liabilities, the code that you're looking for is an 800 code, and in our example, it's wages payable. So you might be using Xero Payroll, and Xero Payroll will put the liability due to your employees to this code for you. If you're not using Xero Payroll, you would need to enter manual journals. But if you're just dealing with a bank, you're dealing with the payment of salaries, do not code it to a 400 code. Make sure it goes to an 800 liability code, and in our case it's going to be wages payable. Description, we can say November salary, and we can say OK. Okay, the final common Xero error we're going to look at is when you are creating a sales invoice. So I'm on the new invoicing screen and I'm creating a sales invoice to Orchid Interior. So I've got the information. It's interior design consultant and it's £500, and that's absolutely great. But what I'm also going to do is recharge a taxi fare to them. So I went to visit their premises. I charged them £500 for my consultancy work, but I also am going to recharge a taxi fare. Now I've got the receipt from the taxi company, and if you have VAT knowledge, you'll know that there doesn't tend to be VAT on taxis. So what we're going to say is the taxi cost was £10. I'll make it easy. We'll use the same revenue code. And what we need to be careful here is that we do charge VAT. So we're a VAT registered business, we're charging VAT on our sales invoice, and we're recharging a taxi fare. Even though there's no VAT on taxis, we're not invoicing Orchid Interiors for a taxi. We didn't provide a taxi service to Orchid Interiors, we're recharging a cost. So even though that cost does not have VAT, because we're a VAT registered business, we need to make sure that we charge VAT. And I see that on a regular basis, that businesses think that if they're recharging something, a flight would be another example, to the business that they're working with, that they don't have to charge VAT, and you do. You also want to make sure that on this line you're coding it to a revenue code, you're not coding it to travel, for example. So that is the final error that I see in Xero on a regular basis. Make sure any recharges, regardless of whether they're VATable or non-VATable items, you include VAT on your sales invoice. So I'm just going to recap on these 5 examples of Xero errors. The first one is not checking that your bank statement balance agrees to your proper bank statement balance. So Xero will say, this is your bank statement balance, please make sure that it's accurate. The second one, reclaiming VAT when there isn't anything to reclaim. Third one, coding small amounts to fixed assets, 700 codes in Xero. The fourth one, coding salary payments to a profit and loss to an expense code. That's wrong. You need to make sure that you're coding your payments to an 800 liability code in Xero. And the final one, the fifth Xero error that I see on a regular basis, is when you're creating a sales invoice, please make sure that you do charge VAT even when you're recharging items that are not VATable, an example being a taxi fare. So I'm hoping that you are not guilty of these Xero errors. If you were in the past, not from now on. I hope you found the video useful. I hope that it will help you avoid these mistakes. I will see you in the next video, but until then, happy Xeroing.